Hello, welcome to the live stream. I want you to know that the cats are being very cute. We could just watch the cats the whole time. Uh, Let me know if you can see and hear me, by the way. I just realized the mic, the cat, once again set at a weird angle, so I just fixed it. Hopefully, the mic is doing a little better. But welcome. Um, my topic for today a was a ruminating on the middle class and kind of the commonly bandied about the middle class is shrinking that we've been hearing for decades in the United States. Um, and I was going to compare it to some other developing economies. I have stats, I have some graphs for you. We can talk about it. I'm less jazzed about talking about it than I was when I proposed this live stream. So I'm open to other topics. We can just shop for marble for my entryway for which is like how unrelatable is that after talking about the shrinking middle class. But I will say the marble is cheaper per square foot than a lot of the porcelains that I'm looking at. But hi, welcome. This is a live stream. We have a donut. Today's donut is a carrot cake donut, which I don't think I've ever actually had carrot cake. I've only had carrot cake. Let's use the overhead camera there. That's not working very well. Okay. So sorry, the lighting is once again a hot mess because the sun's out now. But this is the carrot cake donut. It's very pretty. Has walnuts on it. This is apparently freshly squeezed carrot juice glaze and coconut. We'll see. I don't think I've ever had a real carrot cake. I've had like carrot cake flavored things. I think mostly donuts. How are folks? Oh, there's lots of people here. Great. I love how the music is in direct contrast to the kitten energy level. Oh yeah, I forgot the music was gonna keep playing when the cats were on it. She is just out. She's like, this is Kugel got dinner already. She got dinner at like 4:30. And it's just nap time now. So cognitive dissonance makes the brain go burr. I've been gone a bit. Hope nothing has been going on. Last week a wedding, week before Dublin, 2 weeks before that, Sofia, Bulgaria. I mean, that sounds pretty exciting. That's a lot of excitement. Nothing has been going on really. House files update. We have flooring in 2 of our units and we have walls. So, and it's sunny in Portland, which is alarming. It's sunny and like 75 degrees, which, oh my God, I'm trying to do that in Celsius. It's like, I want to say 23, 24 degrees in Celsius. Anyway, it's March. It's not supposed to be 75 degrees and sunny outside in Portland, and it's making me very nervous about this summer. I know that like an unseasonably warm spring doesn't necessarily mean a super hot summer, but weather is doing weird stuff, and I do not like it. I do not like an ice storm followed by a 75-degree sunny March. But I will say I have discovered how much more energy I have when there's sun outside. I kind of forgot that in the summer, I can do like 4 things in a day. And then on Saturday, it was so nice and beautiful and sunny that, well, on Sunday, I got up, went to work, got up at 3:30 in the morning, went to work, worked a full shift, did some reporting. After work, I like came home, went out and got a coffee treat, did some accounting, went to hot yoga, came home, biked across town, got some ramen, then we went out to like a patio, then went and did some grocery shopping errands and came home. And it was like 7:30 p.m. and I was like, I should be very, very tired by now. But you can get so much more done in a day when there's light and sun outside. And you feel optimistic about things. Toronto had snow falling hard today. My place got so dark. I'm sorry. Oh, now I'm just rubbing all the sun in your face. Apparently the rain is coming back tomorrow, which is mildly inconvenient for me because I have to go do some field reporting in the suburbs tomorrow and at like a track and field competition. So not super stoked about doing that in the pouring rain, but I am excited about the story though. Same in Seattle. Yay, fake summer. No climate change. Yeah, I know. It's like this used to we used to get like the February fake out in Portland where we'd get like nice weather in February, but it wasn't quite this nice usually, and like I it didn't give me as much concern because weather has just been so it's climate change has been very visible in Portland for about the past 3-4 years since we had that like 114-degree day like heat bubble where like over 70 people died, mostly like in their apartments, and because they didn't have air conditioning. And that was like the turning point for me where I felt like climate change was a thing that was like happening, and a thing that was happening to people in other places. But since 4 years ago, since the heat dome and that really, really hot weather, it has felt like I guess I've just felt like that it's here, like physically here in Portland. Wedding was in Lakewood, New Jersey. Maybe I should think of a new exercise trend I should stop. Horror aerobics. That actually sounds amazing. That sounds like an amazing yeah. I'm thinking about like in aerobics class when you use like the set of weights. I feel like you could get a like community vibe going with horror aerobics. I like this idea. How sore were your shoulders after that? We had snow at the end of the day too, yesterday and today too. Wow. The other day was a small hail and sunny, so I don't know what's going on outside. I don't understand the weather. I'm old enough to remember when we used Fahrenheit. Wait, did the UK use Fahrenheit? I didn't know that. I actually had no idea that the United Kingdom used Fahrenheit. I thought it was only America that used freedom units. So do we have you to blame? Because you guys still like use weird imperial, you like use it simultaneously where you'll use like feet and then you'll also use meters, and it's very confusing to me. Which I mean, just like maps for Britishness where you're like, I kind of want to be part of Europe, but not really. I want to be special. So I don't think I knew that Fahrenheit was used. I genuinely didn't know it was used anywhere other than the United States. It's such a weird, I really like it for measuring weather. Some of that is because I grew up with it. I like that things are in the groups of tens and there's like a good distinction between, I feel like Celsius has just too little variation between the numbers for temperature. But I admit that probably the reason I like Fahrenheit is because I grew up with it. But up until the late 70s when the EU metric stuff came through, the US has tried to switch to metric like I don't even know how many times, but I mean Celsius isn't even part of metric, but like people act like it is. As long as the marble isn't cheaper than the wallpaper. I mean the marble is cheaper than the wallpaper. So we're not tiling a very big portion of it. Newbold 1 says marble seems like a relatively middle-class option. What? What are you talking about? I don't know. It doesn't feel middle-class to me. Every time I say marble, I feel immediately bourgeoisie. Like, just the concept of marble feels like a fancy people thing to me. We are really jumping around in topic here. I'm sorry, y'all. I was listening to a channel about the USA SSI program, and it's horrible and complicated. It makes me want to work hard to be off disability here in Canada. Yes, SSI is, SSDI is really rough. SSI is a little different. So there's Social Security disability income and Social Security income. And it is, if you don't have enough work quarters to qualify for Social Security on your own work quarters, and you have to get Social Security income not based on what you've paid into the system because you have a disability, sometimes lifelong disabilities, sometimes people just never got enough consistent work where they paid into the system. It is miserable. There's really low asset limits for people. It's like nearly impossible to build wealth. And in a lot of states, Medicaid is still not accessible even for some people that are living off Social Security income. Yeah. Every middle class house has marble nowadays, from what I've seen. Okay, see, this is a great existential discussion about how you define a middle class house. I'm sorry. I'm like knocking everything. I'm just so excited to talk about this. Should I continue to let the cat take up quite so much of the screen? I mean, the cat is like way cuter than me, so we'll just keep doing this for a while. Okay, this is a really interesting existential discussion I have. What is a middle class house? How do you define a middle class house? Because I think especially my generation, millennials, and those younger than me, when we think of middle class house, we literally think of just owning a house at this point. For a lot of us, middle class is owning a house. The idea of a working class house being something that exists is really challenging for a lot of millennials in rich countries to imagine. And because there's been just such a boom in the housing market in our lifetime, and we watched older millennials like myself, like, were adults when we watched the housing market like fall out from the bottom. And so our relationship with real estate is very complicated because it like tanked the economy for our early working years. And not to put my experience to generalize for every millennial, because obviously we've all had different experiences. But on the whole, the data shows that millennials are buying houses much later than their parents did. And we have a much lower rate of home ownership. And then when we do buy, it takes up a much bigger portion of our overall income than it did for our parents, if our parents had access to homeownership, which obviously, depending on your socioeconomic background, was out of reach for a lot of people, even just based on race. Like, it may not have been based on income because of how much redlining of neighborhoods happened for our parents. So when I think of a middle class house now, I essentially think of anything that isn't a rich people house. The idea of working class houses is really so lost on me at this point. And I know it was a thing that existed in the 90s. Even really, I would say up until like the 2001 crash, the little baby crash compared to the Great Recession. Like, I know working class houses existed, and I know that they existed in cheaper places until like 2020, until things started getting really, really bid up. But I still don't think of marble as a middle class stone. And part of it for me, when discussing if I want to do marble in the entryway, is the question of if I want to take care of it, which is a very middle class thing, because middle class people are usually not having someone else take care of their stuff. Only really upper middle class, which in the US for a single person would be an income of about 120,000, would be like upper middle class. For a family of four, it can go up to around 230,000. And these numbers are based on like the literal definition of middle class. So generally you can go double whatever the median income is for the household size, and that is considered the upper echelon of middle class. Just that's how the numbers work out when you draw the little line and everything. There's different ways that you can define middle class, and not all of them have to do with income. They can do with social connections. They can do with access to resources. There's all sorts of ways in which middle class is a term that is used much more broadly than just pure numbers. However, when I think of middle class based on that definition, most people, if you're a family of four, earning $150,000 to $200,000 in the United States and you own a home, if you have a house cleaner, it is going to be someone very infrequent unless that's something that you've prioritized. And in that case, would you really want marble? Because it requires more care. Marble, and like most natural stones, I think of as something where it's fine to have if you're paying someone to clean it for you. Am I overthinking this? Okay, there's a lot of discussion going on here. I must not be middle class. I just got quartz countertops, but no one gave me a choice. See, I think of as quartz as a middle class choice because it tends to be cheaper, it wears easier, and you don't need special cleaners to take care of it. It's not going to like stain and stuff like that. So I think of quartz as a middle class. Or granite. See, I think of granite now as a fancy, not middle class thing. Some have laminate, but not newer construction. Yeah, I haven't seen laminate. I see laminate in rentals pretty often, which I would describe laminate as like a working class countertop, if we're going to talk counters, or flooring. Really, I just think of laminate as working class because I consider it part of rentals, which isn't how it originally started out. But really now, I would say it's in rentals more often, except for LVP, which is a little different, but. Oh yeah, miles per hour on the roadways in the UK. It's so weird. It's so confusing. Orthodox wedding horrors are hardcore. So how are your shoulders, David? I want to know. Okay, until they wake up from the nap, the cats will be the largest thing on the screen. It has been declared. I was seconding quartz. That's why the guy who replaced the old counter offered such a good deal. See, I think quartz is the middle class stone, but not quartz floors, because quartz floors aren't really, that's very expensive. My dad did real estate and I learned to estimate house prices early just based on their house prices and birthday party locations. That's kind of amazing. That's kind of straight up amazing that you were like calculating that. I went to public school and I definitely knew when the kids were the rich kids. My like elementary and middle schools were like fairly economically diverse because of the place that we were in. And I would describe, I like absolutely knew who the rich kids were. So yeah, because they would have like, they'd have like better clothes and certain brand names. Yeah, you could tell. You could absolutely tell. I didn't go to many birthday parties at people's houses, so. Marble is somewhere between feathers and eggshells in terms of care and feeding. Needs to go to the dry cleaners. Right. Well said. Oh yeah, Girl Scouts. That could tell you something there. Shoulders fine. My kneecaps are out of alignment. It is good for dancing in a circle. That means you were lifting properly, though, if your shoulders, like you were using the right parts of your body if you were lifting and your shoulders were fine. Okay, so much is going on here. Jennifer says, I like the topic. Hi for being a new viewer and then saying that you like the topic and then we're only very mildly talking about it. I guess I also like the topic, but I was finding myself less motivated to discuss it. I guess we are discussing middle class generally now. The short answer is that yes, the middle class is shrinking in America. The middle class is also shrinking in Canada. But it's not as bad as a lot of people would believe that coming out of the pandemic, we're all feeling the effects of inflation in all countries in the world. Japan, I should do a whole live stream on what's going on with Japan's economy because it's very interesting. They just reversed their negative interest rate that they've been doing for 8 years because they've got inflation on target. It's very, very fascinating. I'm getting off track again. I'm not very organized, y'all, today. I'm sorry. So, every country in the world has been feeling the effects of inflation, and every income level has been feeling the effects of inflation. But people who are in the lower income classes, so lower than middle class, in rich countries have actually come out the best post-pandemic. Their wages are increasing at higher rates, and generally, even once you adjust for inflation of core goods, lower income people are better off than they were before the pandemic in rich countries, especially in the United States. And that's because we saw so much wage growth among lower wage workers. So that kind of evened out. One of the problems, though, is the dependence, especially in North America, so US and Canada, let's say rich countries, is the dependence on cars to get to work. So one of the problems is that we are very price indifferent to how we respond to increases in prices to gasoline. And if the price of gas goes up in America and you need your car to get to work, you're going to keep buying it rather than substituting a different good. So if the price of Brussels sprouts shoots up double the price at the grocery store, you just won't buy Brussels sprouts anymore. You'll buy some other vegetable, you'll substitute some other good. But when it comes to gasoline, we are so car dependent in North America, especially, and especially among lower wage workers who tend to be more commonly located outside of the urban core, despite this pervasive belief that most poor people live in the cities. Most poor people live in rural areas in North America. And when you are low income and working and you live in North America, you need a car to get to work. And that means that can take the biggest hit to your real purchasing power of your wage. So if your wage goes up by 30%, which is what a lot of workers saw, like a lot of lower wage workers saw their wage jump from $9 or $10 an hour to $15 an hour over the past 4 years, which is, a 50% increase in your total wage. But the price of gas has gone up by 30%. You're seeing a much lower purchasing power because we are so price indifferent to cars. That isn't to say that that's across the board true for everyone. I don't use a car. I live in a city. But that generally, when we are talking about one of the biggest threats to people entering the middle class from lower wage workers, one of the things is the dependence on cars. So why else is the middle class shrinking in America? Well, part of it is that we're seeing huge increase in the amount of wealth that is taken up by the people in the top incomes. So the top 1% of earners in the United States have 21% of the wealth in the country, which is a real Gini coefficient snacker there. And because of that, we are seeing the middle class shrink, because if you're just defining the middle class as the middle 50% of wage workers, so you've got the 25% at the top, the 25% at the bottom, middle class is the 50% in the middle, then if this part up top, as far as wages, is like sharing up at an increasingly bigger wage, this part is going to get shrunk because the numbers are going to get smaller if the numbers on the top are getting bigger. Does that make sense? I really need a whiteboard right now to explain this. The other part is that there are more people in the lower income groups, but that's predominantly children. And that's because households are growing at the lower income side of, so people that are below middle class, working class, working class in America are having larger households. And because of that, we are seeing the number of people that are in that group, childhood poverty, um, expand. And one of the really very, very cool things that happened during the pandemic was that there was a massive expansion of transfer programs, which are social support programs in the United States. And they were able to cut childhood poverty in half just by expanding school lunches, and increasing the amount of WIC and SNAP, which are two of the social support programs in the United States, and the child tax credit. And then guess what? That's gone now. And we're back to not snapping childhood poverty in half. When you look at middle class and when you look at middle class kind of definitions, there's two different definitions that economists use when they're looking at the income amount. And one of the common ones in rich countries that do have a lot of tax and transfer programs is to look at income after tax and transfer. And that's because at the lower income side of the spectrum, in a rich country like the United States, you do get social support. You have SSI, you have SSDI, you have SNAP, you have the Earned Income Tax Credit. You have all sorts of transfers that effectively boost the typical wage of a worker, versus a developing economy that doesn't have the money to be giving out to people in poverty. So you see this in Latin American economies that are doing better at getting people into the middle class, but for the people that are living below the world poverty line of $1, of $2 a day, depending on which definition you use, those folks are not getting tax and transfers from their government because their government isn't rich enough to be doing those. And so when you look at rich economies, it's important to kind of separate out those two numbers, because looking in real terms and then looking after tax and transfers, middle class is also a recipient of tax and transfers in the US. However, they tend to get less than the lowest income group. And the biggest tax and transfer to the middle class for a very long time was the mortgage interest deduction. And the mortgage interest deduction essentially allows people that buy their house in the United States to just deduct their mortgage interest off their federal taxes. That's probably one of the biggest, like, essentially tax transfers that we have that middle class people benefit from. But all of those kind of transfers that middle class people benefit from, the people that usually benefit the most from it are actually the highest income earners, unless they have a phase out. So there are phase outs for various things, like the deductibility of Roth IRA is a great example, where high income earners, certain kinds of taxes, there's phase outs. However, mortgage interest deduction, there is not one. And now it's with the Tax Cut and Job Acts, otherwise known as the Trump tax era reforms. A lot of things are very weird right now between 2018 and 2025 in taxes that are not typically how US taxes have been. And we'll kind of see what happens with if it gets sunset in 2025. Is any of this interesting, y'all? Is any of this interesting? There is so much going on in the chat, y'all. I cannot keep up with that. Clothes and brand names definitely in the adolescent years. As a dude, I didn't care, but man, you did see after others lusting after Guess jeans, saddlebred shirts, and Oxbed Einer handbags circa 81. In my generation, it was Abercrombie and Fitch. This is like late 90s, early 2000s. Abercrombie and Fitch was a really big one. American Eagle was on the rise. That was like the rich kid. And you can tell that like the rich kids were upper middle class where I was, because the really rich kids went to private school, um, and I didn't see them. I would see them at the ice rink sometimes, but I was just like people that had massive levels of generational wealth were not at my public school. It was a good school, but that was just not happening. But like, so this is like suburban rich, so upper middle class. And those people would have American Eagle, Abercrombie and Fitch. I'm sure there was a handbag, but I was like not cool enough to really keep track of that. Um, I wasn't very femme, so I didn't tend to. And then I think like the next step down would be you would shop at Old Navy and Walmart. And that was like the regular middle class shopping places. Okay. Yesterday, negative interest rate policy was trending on Twitter. It took me a while to figure out what that was. Yeah, so we'll do a stream on Japan. It's too much for me to explain it cogently, and I'm gonna probably need some graphs. So, and really, what do we want? A graph or a cat cam right now? I think we want a cat cam. Thank you for a live stream topic next week. I will absolutely talk about Japan's economy. It's very fascinating. I've been threatening to do an update on Japan's economy, and the fact that they just reversed their negative interest rate policy is very exciting. Jennifer says, housing makes me feel poor now. Houses are too expensive and rentals seem like price fixing. I mean, I think the rent is definitely too damn high. And I say this as someone who's been a renter my whole adult life and now is about to be a landlord. I wouldn't describe it as price fixing, but I would say that the market rate is not keeping pace. The market rate for rentals is not keeping pace with wage growth. And I mean, that housing as a share of your total wage is one of the biggest illustrations of how middle class does not feel the same as it did for boomers. And that's, I mean, I think in a large part driven by some of the other demographic trends we were seeing. It wasn't typical for people to be living alone with no other household members and expecting to rent an apartment by themselves into their 20s and their 30s. That was not typical. It especially was not typical among like middle class people 2 generations ago. You would not be out and renting your own place. You would be living with parents until you got married and then setting up house. Or if you didn't have parents or couldn't live with your parents, you would be living in a boarding house with a roommate, any number of these things. It's just we have very different demographic trends now where the expectations of what housing looks like is different, and we have not built to keep up pace with that demand. Some of that has to do with the fact that a lot of homeowners have blocked the building of new apartment buildings for a really long time, and other kinds of multifamily housing like duplexes and triplexes as, a form of NIMBYism because they don't want to live near renters because renters were icky and we bring down the neighborhood, especially working class renters, right? And that set of policies has meant that very few cities have kept pace. Also, more and more people have been moving to cities over, we don't have the distribution of where people live has been changing, and this is a worldwide thing, and cities just do not have enough places for everybody. I don't know what is going on. I do not know what is happening with David and Minnie's discussion, but I want to go back and read this discussion when I'm not live. I'm now looking at rent to own options here in my city. There's a company that gets grants for co-ownership where they come in with your down payment if you have 5%. I don't know enough about Canadian rental rules. Rent to own generally in the United States is a bad deal. Most people that do rent to own do not ever end up owning the place, and it's just generally a way to get extra fees built onto your rent, and it doesn't end up parsing out well. One reason is that and this is just to be clear, I do not know enough about how it's structured in Canada. I do know that Canada has, similar to the US, a lot of land trusts, which I think can be a better option for low income housing versus rent to own. Rent to own, the contracts just don't tend to be very solid towards the renter that is looking to buy. Land trusts would be kind of similar to the co-ownership situation, that the term co-ownership, which would be the land trust will own the land underneath the house or the apartment if it's a leasehold apartment or condo, and it is held in trust. So that lowers the price of the actual housing because the land is not included in it. And the land trust then ensures that housing, that apartment, whatever it might be, is always affordable. So the trust is like some sort of trust for low income housing, something defined at a state level. And they, as a nonprofit, hold all of that. And it can lower the cost. And then sometimes there's income limits for who can move into those properties in order to like ensure that there's low income home ownership available. Land trusts are pretty dope. I don't think there's enough places doing them. There might be another structure that you're thinking of, but generally rent to own does not work out great for folks. Sometimes there's some interesting structures with like community housing development corps where you could call it rent to own, but it's not quite the same as the rent to own contracts here, where a portion of your rent would go into a separate it would be an individual development account, which is legally a type of account in the United States that can only be used by within certain categories. And that IDA would then be used for a down payment and then matched towards a down payment. So I was in an IDA program where there's no spots available at any of the subsidized rentals anywhere in my city. So that was just not an option. But I was in the IDA program where I would have to save $100 every month. And then when I pulled it out to use it for a down payment, it would get matched 5-to-1 up to, I think it was up to $2,000. So essentially they would give me $10,000 if I saved $2,000. And I had to do some like education kind of requirements and stuff like that. In the end, I converted that IDA to a business ownership IDA, and I got the match. And that's because the housing market became so inaccessible here in Portland that I wasn't able to find anything in my price range. Two of the co-ownership companies launched during the pandemic and been boomed with getting government grants. Could be a great deal or could crash. I'm kind of interested. If you do you know any of the names of them? Because I would kind of be curious to kind of dive into them. Maybe I can either do some journalism or a live stream on them. The cats are being so cute. Look at her. She's just looking straight at the camera. I once got a citation from fashion police in high school. Those cheerleaders were mean. Oh my gosh. What class were people who bought Kirkland clothes? I didn't grow up near a Costco, so I don't know. But I would probably say middle class. I would say Kirkland is middle class. My mother's arguments for grandbabies was the Canadian child tax credit 0 to 18. It's a lot of money based on income, although then the education savings plan has a match on contributions. So I used to have an ex who was, I still have the ex. My ex is still around. But when we were dating, she was Canadian, and she was so surprised to find out that the American government doesn't pay you for having kids here. She was like, "What do you mean they don't get paid? What do you mean there's not a government tax credit?" And I was like, I as an American was like, "What do you mean there's just like the government just gives you money for having kids?" I was so confused. So that really highlights the differences between the countries. Although during the pandemic, we had that for a little while. Um, uh, Parking too. I took a job where I assumed free parking. Turned out not. Nasty surprise. Ooh. I don't qualify for Habitat for Humanity here. Single families, they want you volunteering in the organization, but if I had children, I wouldn't. Um, they do like a sweat equity thing for Habitat for Humanity. I have a friend who works for them here. They're very, very interesting, although they're starting to charge interest now, and they were always like, there was no interest on their mortgages because it's Jimmy Carter's organization and he's a Christian, and interest is illegal in the Bible. But in order to expand the number of families they helped, they decided to stop being the ones issuing the mortgages themselves. And so instead now they charge interest on their mortgages, which is kind of a bummer. But our borough is one of them. Life at Key is the second one. Co-ownership ship companies that launched during the pandemic. Okay, I'm copying this, and then I will go look those up. I can't look them up right now, but I'll look them up for a different stream. That's very interesting. Rent to own is predatory in the US, definitely, at all levels, real estate or even bigger household goods. Yeah, absolutely. That is, well, and it's very interesting because the like rent to own is being rebranded for the middle class in the same way that layaway is being rebranded through these affirm and buy it later and everything now. They're a little different because you get the instant gratification and then you get the little amounts coming out of there, but it is very similar. Um, what is Kirkland Clothes? It's Costco's store brand. It's hard for the folks who are temp. I don't know how they handle that situation. I know people got cars towed and it's not a good scene. Yeah, I used to work at the bike valet at Oregon Health and Sciences University, which is like our largest employer in the state. And it's built on top of a giant hill, and so there's just absolutely not enough parking. And it's built on top of a giant hill, and then at the base of that hill is where the like aerial tram is, and that neighborhood, due to a lot of redlining of what was historically the immigrant neighborhood in Portland. So there used to be a neighborhood there called South Portland, and it's sort of where every new generation of immigrants would live when they moved to Portland. So it was a lot of like the Russian Orthodox Jews, and then later it was a lot of like Hungarian Jews, and it would be like Irish groups of people, and then it would be originally Chinese settlers after the Chinese Exclusion Act changed. So South Portland, historically the immigrant neighborhood, kind of like built into different groups of immigrants. Of course, they put a giant highway through it, and got rid of that neighborhood. That's what they do. And that highway cuts off this little tiny strip of land between the river and the hill that the OHSU is on. And it's a land grant university, so it's like stuck where it's at. It's also like one of the only the only Trauma One hospital in the state, and it's at top of a hill that's like really hard to access. So great planning there. But because of that problem, there was never enough parking. And med students and temp workers, which they had tons of temp workers because they're like a teaching hospital, like there's just lots of jobs. And temp workers, med students, like nursing students, they also have a dental school there. They would all like finish school before they would ever get a parking permit. And I worked at the bike valet at the base of the tram, and they built this aerial tram up the hill. as an effort to get people to bike to work, use the bike valet. That was all funded by their parking and transportation because they were so desperate to get people to use other modes because there was just no way to get parking. There would be professors at OHSU that would get tenure before they would get a parking permit because there was just so little parking on the Hill. So I think the solution is we should all build triplexes in Portland. Well, I don't know if I would necessarily recommend that. But I do think that more missing middle housing will help a little bit. Toe Beans alert. Yes. Little Toe Beans. She's so tired. She's so tired. She's the tiredest kitty. I love how the topic is housing, but really we've been watching the cat the whole time. We've been going for 45 minutes, and I don't know if I've really in any way addressed this topic. So, Craig says, good topic. I hope that we're talking about that. We're talking about middle class. I don't know how useful any of this is. Good for medevac by helicopter. Everything else, not so much. Yeah, I mean, ambulances can go up the hill, but the ambulance response times are just definitely worse. And then one of the problems was during that ice storm, ambulances were having trouble getting up the hill, and we were having to have trucks come rescue ambulances and fire trucks, and it's at the top of the hill. It's not great. Should we eat a donut? Y'all, the cat is so very tired. She's so tired. Okay, well, this is Talking Dough and eating donuts. And we've talked about economics, so now it's time to eat a donut. Here's a donut. We'll go back to the cat in a second. Carrot cake. It's a regular raised donut on the bottom. It's got these walnuts on the top, little bits of dried coconut, and then apparently this is a fresh squeezed carrot juice. I don't know much about carrot cake. Does carrot cake actually use carrots? Also, I accidentally bought too many carrots at the grocery store, so please tell me if I can make carrot cake easily from it. I'm not getting any of the carrot. It just tastes like sugar, but I will say the little bits, it's got a really good texture profile because the glaze is actually pretty hard and sticky. And then it's got all these little walnuts and the dried coconut. It's got a great texture combination. Middle class is many things. We didn't touch on immigrant middle class. Yes, that is true. I could not keep up with your immigrant middle class discussion in the comments because it was going too fast for me. But I do think it is worth discussing. I just saw an Economist article today about the fact that Britain is doing a very good job at immigration and assimilation, which is really interesting. But their immigrants tend to be middle income, assimilate fairly quickly. And a bonus for the economy. It's usually That is often true in a lot of countries, but there tends to be a lot of focus on refugees as opposed to the majority of immigrants, because majority of immigrants are not refugees. And almost all countries are doing, oh my God, the cat is so cute. We have to go back to the cat. Look at her. She's so tired. A lot of countries are doing a really poor job managing refugees, partially because there's been so many conflicts in the world. There's a refugee crisis constantly. But immigrants are quite often middle class simply, and get to middle class sooner simply because to be an immigrant, you usually need to have enough resources and social connection in order to be able to make the trip at all. Is carrot cake a Jewish staple? Interesting. At least among the British Jewish community. I would not call it a Jewish staple in the United States diaspora. We can maybe get David to weigh in on that. Carrot cake uses carrots shredded fine, used as a source of moisture in the batter. Interesting. Well, it's definitely not in the batter of the donut here. Sorry, the lighting is so inconsistent because the stupid windows. We may have to move this live stream time just for the light purposes. Although, I'll have a new set at some point soon. Look at her. It doesn't usually have coconut, though. Interesting. Okay, this is winning on texture. Flavor-wise, that's what I have to say about it. The flavor, beautifully done. The texture, beautifully done. Flavor is just predominantly sugar, I would describe it as. Okay, we do have a little donut log. I've been doing these before the stream and then just filling in the ratings on the stream. How do we feel about this? Look, we're really filling it up pretty quickly. Okay, so here it is. Carrot cake donut, dough donuts, price $3.75. Fresh carrot glaze, toasted coconut, roasted walnuts, a raised donut. There's no filling. There's the picture of it. And I am going to rate it 3.5 out of 5. It's good. I don't know if it would be the first thing I would get, but it was pretty good. She's continuing to be cute. Some people put in raisins. I don't think I would like the raisins in it. I like raisins, but I don't think it would work for me. My fave part of carrot cake is the sour cream with sugar added, sweet sour combo frosting. Oh, interesting. I definitely can picture that in my head now. I've seen it on carrot cake. You have to have cream cheese frosting on a carrot cake. It's the law. Do you have to have cream cheese frosting on a carrot cake donut, though? Possum Planner says, not the headline I was expecting. Are you talking about the middle class, or are you talking about the fact that all we're doing is talking about marble and carrots? Look how cute she is. She's very cute. Oh, not the headline I was expecting was in regards to the Britain doing well with immigrants. I know, not the headline I was expecting either, but it's actually a really interesting analysis. I'm not doing it credit because I read it at like 4:30 in the morning, and I have not uh, figured out how to do that. Well, that's the thing, New Bold One, is that everybody, except for the poor souls who survived the Channel crossing. Well, I mean, but that's the thing, is that like that's refugees. That is a different category of immigrants, and it tends to be the thing that people focus on, but that's actually a very small group of the total like immigrant population at any given time. Most immigrants are legal immigrants and rarely are economic immigrants, and migrant workers tend to be fairly good at assimilating in British society. I hate the frosting on carrot cake. I cut it off. Ship the frosting upstate. I'll take all of it. Okay, we've got a plan here. Canada increased international students to $20,000 before they come into the country. Yeah, the UK is the same way. It's like when I was looking at going there, I needed to have, I think like, I think I needed to have 20,000 Great British pounds in my bank account and then show sufficient income, which was, I think, 1,500 pounds a month if I was living in London for the duration of my course. And then I also had to pay in cash for the course, and I had to pay like double the rate of a domestic student. And that's similar to how much you have to have for support when you're a student going to Germany as well, even though the actual university is free. I thought the Jewish baked staples was rugelach. And knish. Wow. Okay, now we're just naming delicious foods. Knish is not really a dessert. I mean, you could make a dessert knish. Anything can be a dessert if you just change what's in the inside. Sometimes wonder if people who consider themselves middle class are wealthier than they believe they are. Well, for one, if you are in a rich country, if you're in a G7 country or an OECD country and you are considered middle class there, then you are rich in the rest of the world. And, middle class in a developing Latin American economy is making $1,500 a month in income. In the United States, if you made $1,500 a month in income, you would be qualify for Medicaid, which is our poor health insurance in many states. At the very least, you would be working class. The definition of what is considered middle class on a global scale is shockingly different than the United States. A great example is India, which has very much a developing economy, has a growing middle class, and a lot of people expect it and have been putting pressure on it for it to be the next China, in that China has brought a ton of people into the middle class in just one generation. And it is a booming consumer market in China because of the economic policies that have brought people from poverty, a lot of people from subsistence poverty, to middle class and upper middle class in China. But in India, it's still about 28% of the population is living in global poverty. And more than half of Indian workers would not be able to afford an iPhone without it being half of their annual salary. So when you look at the global scale, yes. But I also recognize what you're saying, which is that middle class is very much used as a political term. People use it to define themselves by identity in a way that is far outside of the wealth that they have access to and their income. There are an awful lot of people that are making what puts them outside of that middle class income. People that are making, maybe $160,000 a year, as a two-person household that think that they are upper middle class, but in fact they are rich. They are in the upper class. They are in the top 20%. Um, and so yes, I think it is a very much considered a political term. We spend a lot of time with people trying to emphasize that they are middle class. There's also a lot of people who think they grew up poor, but actually just grew up middle class. And then when they meet people who actually grew up truly poor, they realize that they were just always comparing up. So, yeah, I think that's very true, and I don't necessarily think that is shade on people. It's very easy I mean, sociologists study this, economists study it a little less, but this is just a thing that happens in group think, essentially, and yeah, I think that's we're always going to compare up. How is middle class? Like, not numerically, but socially. So there's a couple different ways that you can think about middle class. It is some of it has to do with like your perceptions. So if you perceive yourself to have choices, to have mobility at a certain rate, that can have to do with the feelings of middle classness. Um, what options you perceive as being available to you, whether or not they actually are or are not, really can influence how you think about your class. A lot of it has to do with the level of optimism you have about your financial future. Generally, people that are poorer tend to be more pessimistic about the future and about their own economic future, and they tend to spend money in a way where they are not as optimistic about the fact that the way that they would spend money would change their own outcomes. Um, some people say it has to do with like a scarcity or abundance mindset. I think that is like a valuable framework, but I don't think that is all of it. It can have to do with the like if the water out of your tap is coming clean, if you have running water, if you're worried about the basics utility shutoffs, are you worried about having electricity? Are you worried about having a roof over your head? The feeling of being able to slip back into poverty is how a lot of economists will define. So when we look at middle class, like on a socioeconomic scale, when we're looking countrywide and we're looking at how much middle class are, one of the questions is how quickly could someone slip back underneath that poverty subsistence line? And once people have more financial cushion, and that could not always be in the way of savings. That could be that they live in a community that will support them. They have the kind of family connections where they would be able to fall back on something like that. Those social connections can be part of what prevents. If everyone in your community is broke, poor, and desperately just trying to get enough food and clean water, then you have less opportunities to get out of that situation. And if you are finally making a middle class income, but everyone around you is very, very poor, then your chance of slipping back down under the line because you don't have the same level of social support is much higher, right? This is like the social determinants of your class can be a structure. Class is also, it has a racial and ethnic side to it as well. There is generations of wealth that have not been accessible to people because you were not allowed to own houses in certain neighborhoods. You were not allowed to pass that then wealth on to your family. And that kind of the effects of redlining, the effects of racist policies about what communities people can live in have an effect on class as well. So having income without access to the same level of generational wealth within African American communities, in the US specifically, you really can see how there can be a generational effect of class. And class mobility is something that not every society has. Class mobility is something that we have quite a lot of in the United States, but not every country has the same level of class mobility necessarily. Middle class in Nepal would be owning a motorcycle. Only rich people have cars. Yeah, that was true in India as well, which India is a much richer country than Nepal. But in the community I lived in, like absolutely rich people had cars, and then motorcycle was absolutely middle class. But then like getting to the motorcycle level was like that was up from poverty and subsistence level. Robin says my 16-year-old asked me yesterday what sort of salary she should look for as an adult. Like, what is a reasonable amount to have a nice life here? What would you say? Is this in the United States? Um, I mean, that's the thing is like, what field and what city is she living in? Median income is like a great place to start if you're trying to like aim for middle class, but it has a lot to do with like her wants and needs. That's like, I wish that you could just be like, I want to aim for $75,000 a year. Let's find a job that makes that. But yeah, I mean, it really depends on where you're at and what lifestyle is like. Like I make at my day job, I make about $80,000, and then I have other income, about 80, a little less than that, and I have some other income as well from my like side hustles, but I spend less than $20,000 a year, and that is very much like a factor of my various lifestyle choices. But I've been in the situation where I've made $20,000, and I just because I can live on it doesn't mean I want to. So, but also it's very rare to be making as much as I'm making in my field, especially for someone starting out. I mean, I've been in media for a long time, so. Speaking of 4:30 in the morning, have you considered a time lapse of those early morning selfies you have? I did do a reel on, I did a reel for the beginning of the year where I had all of my dance sessions for early morning, and I like cut them up for 1 second of every one. I was considering doing it for my 1 year at work, but I was too busy actually doing my job that week, so. That should be your next logging activity. A cat log. 9 a.m. cute. 10 a.m. still cute. 11 a.m. continuing to be cute. We definitely discussed we should try to keep track of how many times a day we say to the other one, the cat is so cute. And we absolutely failed to do that. If you like moist cakes, you should use your carrots to make one. They are moist. Interesting. I feel like the answer was 100K, even though that's so much compared to what I've earned in my life. But I feel like she'll need that much in 8 years. I mean, every week there's a debate about whether or not $100,000 is still a lot of money. And the answer is it's still a lot of money, especially on a global scale. But yes, it obviously does not go as far as it used to. There is numbeo.com. So it's spelled numbeo.com is very good for cost of living calculators. That is very helpful kind of starting place to make. Generally, you should aim for being able to cover the type of lifestyle that you want, plus 20% for savings. That's my like aim. I think in the beginning of your career, you're going to be making less than you want to. Yeah, New Bold One says, then bicycles, then on foot, then the lowest income folks would have no shoes. Yep. That is my same experience living in India. I just found out if I had stayed at my old job at the same employer, I'd be making more than I am making now, and I would be eligible for overtime. I mean, eligible for overtime is nice, except that then you have to work the overtime. But when you're salaried and exempt, by the way, the big change. Thank you for the reminder. I should do a live stream topic on this. Big changes for the minimum amount that you need to be considered non-exempt if you're salaried is coming, and it's going to affect a lot of like middle income, especially like nonprofit workers that are salaried non-exempt, and they're going to be eligible for overtime soon. So yeah. When I first moved to Chicago in 2015, I made $28K. I didn't feel like I was middle class until I made $60. I felt like I was middle class once I made $30,000. And at the time I technically was. The median for Portland, the median income at that time was like $40K, but I really started to feel like I was making like more than enough once I hit 40K. Actually, I think it was 39,000. But for many, many years, I had been making like less than $15,000 a year. I did 2 terms in AmeriCorps where you make like $800 a month. I was a Catholic worker where you make $100 a month. And I worked a lot of minimum wage jobs. I also, when I started my business, I was working like a minimum wage job to like support myself and pay for health insurance and stuff like that. And so once I hit, that was like, I had been working 5 jobs and it still didn't add up to like $20,000. And it just took me so long to find a single full-time job that paid me $15 an hour, which was $30,000 a year. And then I felt like, and that was in $30,000 I was making in 2014. And that was like me being like, oh, this is like, I can only have one roommate, don't have to live in a co-op. I don't qualify for SNAP food stamps anymore, like all of that. And then I went up to 39,000 the next year and it felt good. And I was at the point where I was making median income for the city, but at the same time, housing prices had started to go really wild. And that was the point at which I realized like I was unlikely to be able to buy on my income in Portland. And that's when I started to feel like less like I had the tenuous hold on middle class. Yeah. And now I feel like what I make is very reasonable, but I don't have kids or a car. No kids, no car, no coke habit. Really can save a lot, right? Rent in Toronto is on an average 51.7% lower than New York. Thanks, Numbio. Hey, that's actually surprising to me because Toronto is hella expensive, but I mean, obviously New York is too, but I actually thought that they would be closer. I remember when I got my first teaching job when I was making $29K in Los Angeles, and I was so excited. It was so much more than I ever made. So when I went out for the job at where I ended up making $30,000 a year, they asked me for my salary requirements in the interview, and I said a living wage. Because at that time I was like I said, I was juggling 5 jobs to be able to like make ends meet. And a lot of those jobs had like, some of those jobs I had very little responsibility. I was like a minimum wage worker parking bikes, but I was also like doing like, I was like managing large budgets at nonprofits, but I only was like grant funded for like 4 or 5 hours a week. And like I was doing like data entry at a nonprofit, but I was like responsible for their entire subscription database for their magazine. And and it was just really rough. Like Portland had still not recovered from the Great Recession. And so it was very hard to find like a full-time stable job. And I was also at the point where like, because I had gone to college late, but I had had a career before that, I was getting rejected from jobs that made more than I was making, for being like overqualified. And it was just a very frustrating job market. All this to say, I just said that I wanted to make a living wage when they asked me about my salary requirements in the interview, which I look back at that and I think it like was kind of weird, but that nonprofit that I worked for was not known for paying terribly well. And I think the reason that I got offered 30K was because at the time, $15 an hour was like banding about as a living wage. And I think that that's why they offered me 15K. And I got like a 30% raise because I ended up becoming a director within like 4 months of starting there, from like a coordinator to director, because my boss quit. But is that a thing? No kids, no car, no coke habit? I mean, it's a thing I say. I heard someone say it, okay, a bunch of years ago when I got my beloved custom bike. I was at the builder's shop. We were doing, I think, like a test fitting or something like that. And there was a guy there who was like getting fitted for another custom bike. And he mentioned that he had like 7 custom bikes or something like that. And at the time, this was, well, it still is, other than the house, my largest purchase ever. And the person there said, I was like, wait, how do you afford that? And he said, no car, no kids, no coke habit. And I still think of it to this day as a fairly good explanation for why I can afford various things. With daycare costs so high, I do think that, I mean, obviously that this whole number has to be rejiggered if you want to talk about a living wage with a family. I have a car. I'm gonna change that to no kids, no consumer debt, no coke habit, and steal it. I like that word. Cocaine is God's way of telling you that you have too much money. Correct. I mean, addiction is no laughing matter, but it is the most expensive way to get the same high, right? I'm going to get demonetized if I keep saying that. Can you say more about the salary people being eligible for overtime? Is this the federal US? Yes. So, this is a change. So there's been a floor, or there's been a floor where non-exempt salary minimum requirements. So there are different requirements in each state, but there's a federal one. So now if workers don't meet, so there's all sorts of like list of what you have to do to qualify as a salaried exempt employee. So if you are an exempt employee, that means you don't get overtime. And to be a salaried exempt employee, you have to meet certain like requirements as far as your job duties. It's like overseeing certain things, managing people, all sorts of things. But there was another thing that was largely put in place, and for like the most common example is like a retail manager, retail supervisor. They work an insane amount of hours per week, but they don't tend to be paid terribly well. And because of that, there is a floor that says if they get paid less than this much per week or per year, then they cannot be considered an exempt employee and they have to become non-exempt. And it used to be $35,568 per year. They have to get overtime pay when they work over 40 hours a week. So now it's going up. And it is going to be okay. There's a proposed rulemaking. I'm gonna have to do a full live stream on this so that it's too hard for me to pull the data here. But it's going up a little bit and it's gonna be in like the 40s now. So if you make less than like, I think 45-ish, but I'll have to check the exact number, then you are gonna have to get paid overtime. And they've been threatening to raise this for a bunch of years, but then kind of COVID slowed it down. We had like almost had a heart attack at my nonprofit because we had so many people that were salaried exempt that made less than like 30 and change a year. And they were looking at raising the amount back in like 2015, 2016. And it was going to wreak so much havoc because we had so many people that would work like crazy overtime hours, but like only during certain times a year that were salaried. And yeah, so a lot of employers are freaking out that have a lot of kind of lower compensated folks. It doesn't quite roll off the tongue, though. Yeah, do you think no car, no kids, no coke habit rolls off the tongue? Because I think it does. I think most of the people around here should move to New York or maybe California. I don't think this is a good idea. Moving to New York or California is a little too expensive, right? I think I'm being abused on the exemption. It came in New York, but I think my company is skirting the rules. Well, you can file a claim. You can file a claim in New York with your labor board if you want to. And then if they try to retaliate against you, you've got the claim. Can confirm, kids and cars are expensive. I don't have experience with the coke habit part, fortunately. I've got 2 of the 3, no kids and no car. Been coke sober going on 3 years. Woo! Congrats on sobriety. 3 years of sobriety. That's great. They can pretend. No. So if you do those duties, but you get paid below the amount, then they do still have to pay you overtime. So. In New York, it went for executive and administrative to $62,400 for New York City, and the burbs, and $58,548 for the rest of New York State, and they will gradually increase each year through 2026. Thank you for pulling the data. That's very helpful. Yeah, it is different in every state, but then there's a federal standard as well. And the federal standard is almost always lower than any states that have implemented something above and away, because the federal standard has to be kind of the minimum. But a lot of states don't have any kind of rulings around these, but it's usually enforced at the state level. So because that's who employers are, like all labor enforcement generally happens at the state level. Yeah. Okay. How are you all doing? We've been chatting for a really long time. We've been going. How about you tell me what you're looking forward to this week? We've done the donut. We have definitely talked about classes a lot. This was not the live stream I planned. Part of the reason is because I have graphs available, but I can't play them because the channel that I would play them on is being taken up by CatCam, and I think CatCam is much more important than the graphs that I stole from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So we talked about the topic. We talked about Marble. I have 2 questions. 1, tell me what you're looking forward to this week. And 2, if you have experience taking care of marble floors, am I an idiot for wanting to put it in my entryway? Because I can't find what I want in porcelain, which is the plan for the entryway. And I have now been told it's going to be very hard to find because 12 by 12 is not the cool size anymore. And I am thinking about just getting marble, but it does require that you use a special cleaner because you can't have the wrong pH level on marble. And I am going to have to seal it every year, but it is only going to take like 45 minutes to seal. It's actually quite an easy job, and I've heard that from multiple people that have done it. And it's in a place where we're not going to have furniture, so it's not going to be like a big pain in the butt to seal it, like just pull bikes out. But I am a little worried about wet bikes on it, just because if water is pooling, it can be kind of bad for the marble. But we could also just put a thing down underneath the bikes. And I think that would, and then we'll bring it up when we have guests. Anyway. I was late to this party. What is a livable wage these days? Well, the answer is it depends. That's a simple answer. Marble in an entryway? Y'all, wow, you really are trying to. Marble is a classic entryway. It's classic for an entryway. It's what I want. I'm not doing polished marble. I'm not talking like the shiny ass marble. Marble, honed marble tile, the classic checkerboard marble for an entryway. I want to do it. I want to do it. I haven't been able to find it in porcelain. Got a car, but I'm still waiting on kids in the coke habit. I like how this is now aspirational, apparently. Do not put marble under your feet due to upkeep, resealing, upkeep. See, but I don't mind this the ceiling. I actually think the ceiling would be more frustrating in a bathroom where you've got like the constant moisture and everything like that. It's my thought. It's my thought. It's very hard wearing and classic and timeless. Fuzz Bubbles is excited. New Stardew Valley update today. I'm not doing glazed tile. I want to do... Okay, this is what I wanted. I wanted porcelain, 12 by 12, marble look tile in gray and white for the entryway. It had to have some texture to it so that it like will be non-slip. Guess what? You can't find it. It's very hard to find. Find me two that match and that are in 12 by 12. It's very hard to find them in 12 by 12 now, and I've talked to a professional interior designer and several flooring contract places now, and it's just very hard to find. But the marble is easy to find and less per square foot, frankly. And so, yeah. And the installation isn't going to be any more expensive in the space that we have. And it's on the ground floor, so we don't have to worry about weight because marble is more heavy. And I also don't really like the look of a lot of the porcelain stuff because it's printed. So livable wage statistically speaking, I understand it can vary based on one's location. Yes, a livable wage in Argentina is extremely different than a livable wage in New York City. This is just a fact. Bad for the marble. I think you underestimate how terrible marble is when wet or icy. See, maybe I do underestimate. I don't know. I've talked to a couple people that have marble floors and none of them are too upset about it. I dislike the idea of like not being able to use like any high pH cleaners on them. Minnie is excited about government-funded physiotherapy going well, but I do wonder about when it's over when I only get it 6 to 8 weeks, finishing week 3. Don't worry about week 6 to 8 right now. I'm glad it's going well, though. Are you keeping good notes so you can do your PT when you're like outside of PT? Very important. I still do all my PT. I want everybody to know that. I want to get a grade A mark from all my previous physical therapists. I still do them every day. I do all my little exercises because otherwise my shoulders suck. My concern with marble would be slippery. We live in a wet place. Well, so would the porcelain. I'm getting honed though, not polished. Honed. And it'll have grout. This is all I'm trying to say. Nobody wants me to get the marble, do they? You have to catch the seal first. That can be tricky. Silly joke. Yes, very silly joke. It's a classic entryway for Roman emperors. Yes, it's a classic entryway for a lot of things. If you think of a Brooklyn brownstone, they have marble entryways. Either checkerboard or the little hex tiles with the little things laid out. Marble is really soft and scratches super easily. Marble is not soft. It's got one of the hardest levels. The scratches I don't mind. It'll get patina over time. We'll see. Like, that's not a thing I'm worried about. But it has one of the biggest hardness scales of all of the things. Am I wrong now? I don't think, no. Okay, you're right. You're right. Sorry. I've been doing a lot of, I've been looking at a lot of things. Okay, it is soft. But why is nobody letting me get my marble entryway? Y'all are probably right. Are you implying I'm not a Roman emperor? Yes, see? I am a Roman emperor. Dressed stone is posh. It is true. It is posh. This is why it's not a middle-class stone, in my opinion. I've been trying to get some stuff done tonight so that I can play the update. Ooh, nice. So apparently Stardew Valley is in many people's plans this week. Minnie, you're cracking me up. Government money was funding the coke habit. It was a wild time. Well, I'm glad that you don't have the coke habit anymore. But you know, I hope you get the government money without the coke habit. Tummy is ready for raspberry blowing if you dare. She's so tired and so cute. I don't think the raspberry blowing, but she usually does want some pets on the belly. Should I go give the kitten some pets so that you all can see it? Here you go. You can see. It's not a trap. You couldn't hear it, but she started purring once I petted her. Nobody wants me to get my marble. You guys are so mean. It's not going to be polished marble. It won't be slippery. We are going to have a good umbrella insurance policy, though, for lots of reasons. Marble is also porous and stains easily. I mean, that's what I'm concerned about, but you have to seal it, but the sealing doesn't take that long. I now have a cat on my lap, so we have cats in both cameras now. I think Machka's telling me that I should stop yelling about marble. B says, because otherwise my shoulders suck. Relatable. I mean, you can still hear it. I guess the mic probably can't pick it up, but every time I do this, you just hear click, 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 click. PT is a lot of posture stuff for the scoliosis, curve, spine pain is a bitch. Yeah. Ooh. Well, I hope they're giving you stuff that you can do at home. My kitchen countertops are honed granite, so I guess I can see honed marble. I thought about leathered marble, but it is, because it's really nice. But it does cost more to leather the marble, and then it is going to have grooves in it, and then it's going to be harder to clean. Because it feels really nice. I would rely on marble hex tiles. Yeah, I do understand the grout would make it less slippery. However, I don't want to clean that much grout, and Aaron doesn't want that much grout because he is like grout PST. Just ask the people in Home Depot about marble. Well, we've talked to a lot of people about marble. It's really broken down into... I do feel like the people that are telling me not to get marble have mostly not had marble. And then most of the people that have told me it's no big deal are people that have it. But it has broken down into more the interior designer crowd. Not the Papa John's ad as soon as she goes to the cat. Oh, I'm so sorry. Robin says, where is her evil twin? I wish you could see on my lap right now. Machka is completely upside down, but she's just out of the view of the camera. And I can't move the camera, but I'm holding her head up and she's doing this. Here's the baby. Here's the baby. Yes. Yes, here's the baby. So this one's Machka, and the one that's sleeping is Kugel. Can we pick up a small sample and walk over it for a few weeks? I mean, we have so many samples. But I don't think the walking over a single sample for a few weeks is going to help. Also, we need to pick the tile really soon. I spent yesterday redoing my monitor mounts and tightening my desk screws. Saturday night was moving around some stuff on my desk, which inspired a large order of new reinforced mounting gear. Ooh. And still my monitor shakes a bit when I type. How hard are you typing? I have questions. I believe everyone's just trying to keep you from making a financial mistake in buying marble and then you realize it was not what you expected. I mean, I don't think it'll be a financial mistake as much as it's going to be a lifestyle mistake. But everybody is making exactly the things I'm worried about. So, yeah, I appreciate that. Can you get it in bigger than 12 inch tiles, like 2 foot by 2 foot? Yes, but it's such a small entryway that would be too big for the space. So I haven't seen a lot of square. So we can get bigger for sure. Bigger is like the trend right now. Right now, 24 by 36 is the trend in tile sizes. I don't want large format tiles because less grout lines means that it'll be more slippery for the entryway, and it's a really small space. So doing too big of tiles is not going to look as good. There's like a certain proportion that you should do as far as tile size based on the size of the space. If marble is living your rich life, then enjoy it. Just take a class at Home Depot on how to care for it. I mean, I'll definitely make sure I care for it properly. This cat has one very sharp claw. Just put down one giant slab like you wanted for the wall upstairs. I definitely can't afford that. And that would be even more of a problem because if one tile gets like stained or damaged, if one part of the slab gets stained or damaged, you can't just replace it. Versus with the tile, if one of them gets totally screwed, we'll get backup tiles and we could theoretically reinstall that. If we did not care, we would not be warning you. Thank you all. I appreciate it. I'll let you know. I'll come back around to this. David claims he doesn't type hard, but then he says his monitor shakes when he types, so. Oh my god. Machka. I am holding Machka up with a hand. Okay. I heard there's a thing called an anti-vibration keyboard mat that says, that sounds true. 2x3 is less grout. That's true. Yeah. It's also just not what I want. I have a vision. I have a vision, Eric. Okay. Well, I hope everybody has a lovely week with their Stardew Valleys, with their physiotherapy, with their hopefully less shaking keyboards that is happening. What other things are people doing? I don't know. The playing triplets on the drums. That's very exciting. I hope everyone has a lovely week. Thank you for stopping by and chatting. I'm sorry if this was a bit disconnected of a live stream, but I do feel like I delivered on the cat content. Although Machka just jumped back on my lap. Here we go. We can have 2 kittens. 2 kittens on the stream. You're so sharp. You're so sharp. On my shoulder, her favorite place to be. David said, I did ask Aaron if he had any advice about keeping the wires on the desk organized. He claimed he was the last person to advise on that. Correct. He really tries. It's just, we have just so many wires. He really tries, though. I'm looking under my desk right now because it's just like a mess of wires under there. Okay, the cat is now moving. Machka's now moving the monitors and is soon to move probably the mic or the camera. So I guess she just kind of fell fell onto my lap. That's the best description. Anyway, the cats are bullying me. I think it's time to leave. Thank you so much for coming. I will see you next week, and we will talk about Japan's economy. Until then, stay safe, stay hydrated, pet a cat if you have one available, and I will see you all soon. Bye.